The Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAAC, has recorded a further increase in distributable revenue with a February 2024 disbursement of 2.07 trillion naira to the three tiers of government. This represents a 23.9% rise from 1.67 trillion naira distributed in January 2024. Allocation to tiers of government comprised 407.27 billion naira for the federal government, 379.41 billion naira for states, and 278.04 billion naira for local government, with all producing states receiving 85.10 billion naira from the 13% derivation fund. Revenue-generating agencies, Nigeria Customs Service, NCS, Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, and Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NEPRC, received 16.27 billion naira, 43.35 billion naira, and 18.68 billion naira, respectively. Well, joining me from United Kingdom, I have Gospel Obele. Gospel Obele is the Chief Economist, Streetnomics. Thank you, Gospel, for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
All right, good morning to you too. Well, I remember the first time I had a conversation on the review of the twin policies of fuel subsidy removal and floating of the foreign exchange regime. It became clear that there are winners and losers in this particular policy. Now, the federal government happens to be a clear winner here too. But how has this affected the lives of Nigerians? It doesn't seem to have trickled down, from top to bottom, looking at the three tiers of government.
Well, I mean, right now, the way Nigeria is structured and the way the economy is currently being run, realize also juggling that with the fact that there's been past deficits in terms of infrastructure, socioeconomic deficits and all of that. You have a situation where any policy being rolled out now would come at a trade-off, either a trade-off to government or trade-off to the people or trade-off to the private sector or trade-off to the social sector. There has to be a trade-off. So the complexities of navigating what must be done or what needs to be done, without and ensuring that the trade-off, the impact of the trade-off are sort of relaxed a bit on all the parties involved. It's sort of like the main question, the big ticket issue right now for the government. And that's a bit very technical when it comes to driving the required leadership efforts to deliver on these. So it's not surprising that there are winners and losers. I mean, that's what you get, in the face of every type of policy right now, as it stands in Nigerian economic landscape.
All right, so talking about this trade-off, especially looking at Nigeria, we've seen what Nigerians have had to suffer. Talk about skyrocketing inflation, talk about people even having to withdraw their children from certain schools to some other schools just so they can make ends meet. Now, in view of all of this, are we not supposed to see this same money is being shared trickle down into the lives of individuals? Aren't we supposed to? I mean, there have been a lot of conversation about minimum wage award and all of this, but nothing seems to be happening yet. State governments are probably just relaxed.
Yes, I mean, we've gone through this route before. I mean, the problem is not lodging monies and reimbursing into sectors that work, in quotes. The challenge has really been a leadership challenge. If you look at it very closely, this was the case we had with the Shopee fund. Subsidies were believed to have been relaxed, in the economy, and those extra monies were put into the Shopee fund to ensure that socioeconomic investments were driven from that fund. So, and in this case right now, we can't really trace to a particular fund where all of these monies are going to be disbursed from, and even if they're being disbursed, what are the set priorities of the current administration to ensure that we're investing in sectors with high returns on those investments and sectors that would impact significantly on human capital development? And when you talk about human capital development, you're talking about education, you're talking about health, and the quality of life of the average person, and there are many economic indicators or activities that are deeply woven to deliver on human capital development, all right? Many sectors that are top of mind, low-hanging fruits to easily deliver on that. But because we don't have that strategic leadership vision, and the efforts are not really coordinated to a particular the efforts are not really coordinated, in view of a particular path, to deliver XYZ outcomes, then we find a situation where excess monies from those subsidies and all of those things are probably not being utilized effectively enough to deliver social good, as the case may be. Now, they may be utilized in where MDAs think that they are needed, but because the Nigerian landscape is largely driven around inefficiencies and a lot of structural deficits, as far as investments are not, delivered at the root causal levels, to ensure that interventions are sustainable, and to grow prosperity and all that, then we'll keep going back and forth, when it comes to inflation, higher cost of living, and all of these results of, really bad decision making by leadership.
All right. In 2022, let's look at the numbers now. 8.209 trillion naira was shared compared to 10.143 trillion naira disbursements in 2023. This is an increase of 1.934 trillion naira or 23.56%. Now, furthermore, February 2024 figure actually suggests a significant 23.9% surge between January and February allocations. Now, what do you actually attribute this to, and how can the federal government sustain this momentum?
Well, the truth is, when you talk about FAAC allocations, you're talking about allocating monies to states and to LGAs in those states for socioeconomic reasons. But if you go further down the line to try to measure the impact of FAAC allocations, I don't think anybody has really done that. You realize that, it's just money that, just like trying to fetch water with a basket. It's money that technically goes down the drain because many subnationals are not commercially viable. All right. So if you have a commercially viable subnational that knows what they're doing, those FAAC allocations could serve as at least mini-level investments or nano investments that could easily go into, core growth drivers or development drivers for that subnational economies. But realize that in many cases, subnational economies are now worse off by virtue of the further down trickle effect of structural deficits they're faced with, and they refuse to invest in. So FAAC allocations happen every month. They happen, look at the amount of money that these individuals collect yearly, vis-a-vis on a month-on-month basis. It's actually quite a lot of money that could go as nano investment into key sectoral drivers. So I would not really bother heavily on in quote unquote the FAAC allocations. I would really think about the accountability, the transparency, the best use of public funds at the very root causal level or at the local government level and all that of this FAAC allocation. And if you triple it properly, many states are not commercially viable. So those funds end up being wasted every month. And we already know the revenue crisis and the revenue situation that we're faced with in Nigeria.
Let me come in here, Gospel. If you can hear me, Gospel, let me come in here. All right. You talked about some states not necessarily being commercially viable, but are you saying that these states lack resources, whether human, natural, or whatever, that they can actually deepen to create value for the people? Now, if these monies are coming in, aren't they supposed to probably invest them in certain things to create value and make lives of people better?
I mean, to a large extent, what you get when institutions are extractives, that means that, these institutions are built to fund or empower a minority over the majority, because once the majority is being empowered, you realize that they'll begin to demand more, hold government more accountable. And before you know what's going on, there is a self-destruct of the system. All right, to avoid that self-destruct and the minority needs to keep empowering themselves. All right, and that's what we found in this case. All right, ideally, again and again, it's a leadership will and reform issue. All right, there is no will and reform from the state governors to put in their best. Yeah, they will come and tell you they don't have enough funds, But at least at that FAAC level, you still see the high cost of governance. You still see the lack of priorities. I mean, a friend of mine was texting me this morning that many of the state governors pitch their progress on the roads that they built. I mean, roads are expected. It's normal. It should be a part of what should be delivered. It's not worthy enough. It's not newsworthy in context. What we are talking about in terms of newsworthiness are investment that are triggering sector growth to empower these subnationals, and how those subnationals being empowered are enabling for regional competitiveness. If nothing happens at that level, these monies will not in any way, bring about the impact you're looking for, and we'll keep going about this conversation. So it's not really about if the FAAC chunk, if the FAAC block is more than what it was last year or less right now. It's more around what exactly is the impact of FAAC when you look at it at 36 states plus the FCT spread, in terms of its delivery for the many donkey years, we've been in existence, as the case may be. I don't think this is sustainable. And I think the fact that many states in Nigeria are not commercially viable is a leakage in itself in the system.
All right, you've talked about a lot of things. One of them sounded like the conspiracy, to ensure that the majority do not benefit, so they will not in turn, ask questions. But then you also talked about how that these amounts are shared between or among the three tiers of government. Now, let's look at it. I want us to, take it a step after the other. So at least maybe the majority will learn to, what to do and probably start asking questions with or without, benefiting first from it. So talk to me. Let's look at the local government level now. What are the expectations? What are the things we're supposed to see from the local government? What are the people supposed to benefit from it? Maybe we should start talking about these things. So, people can then know what they're supposed to ask of their leaders.
So if they don't know what they're supposed to ask, if they don't know what to expect, they can't set an expectation. All right. And it's just very simple. If you don't know what to expect, you can't have an expectation to start with. All right. So in the first place, there is no citizen agenda setting. Citizens are not even aware, and they are not aware enough to be able to coordinate, the movement that needs to happen to hold government accountable and to engineer growth and development in their small community ecosystems, right? We don't have community development as a frontier part or an integral part of socioeconomic development. That doesn't happen in Nigeria. You also have a situation where many of the civil organizations, civil society organizations, and many of the NGOs, so-called NGOs, and even many of them that are even big and all of that, still are not working at the level where they're helping the citizens realize and get the empowerment they need to also lead in terms of the voices and ecosystems building that they can use to hold government more accountable. That's not happening. And as far as that's not happening at the local and community level, then anything can pass, right? To a very large extent, if you have ask the average Nigerian right now, what is the inflation number? What is your local budget? They don't know, they don't care. If I don't tell you, they don't care. Right, so you have a situation where you have ignorance plus arrogance, and that mix is very self-destructive, and it re-empowers at an alter ego standpoint for the critical minority who really need it to stay in power in the context.
All right, there have been talks about minimum wage. I know I started with this. I want to go back there. Talks about minimum wage, wage awards, palliatives, and all. Yet, not so much is being said or done about this at the state level. I know you're more particular about, structural things, structures, investments, and all of that. But then we also understand the situation we're in. And although Lagos has unveiled some initiatives looking at its status, do you think it is doing enough to cushion the effect of these reforms on households' wallets? Not just Lagos now. I want us to just look at the states generally speaking. If you were receiving a certain amount and, you were able to do certain things, and now a lot of persons are complaining we have, high cost of living, and you're getting much more than you used to get before now. What are the things? Aren't you supposed to put measures in place? Aren't you supposed to alleviate the sufferings of these people? There have been talks about maybe some subsidy on transportation, some subsidy on food, Lagos doing Onje Eco and all of that. But are all of these things really enough?
To be honest with you, one of the reasons why I hit heavily on structure is because that's the only sustainable way we can be out of this mess. This mess has been created and curated intentionally and unintentionally over time, over donkey years, all right? Now, leading social welfare programs like what we have in Lagos and all of those states are necessary. They are necessary, but the truth is, regardless of what social programs you bring on the fore, all right, people to a very large extent, for the short, mid to long term, they are going to really be in a very high cost of living crisis. All right. And that is in itself self-destructive, for social economic empowerment and prosperity. No nation can prosper on the grounds of social welfare programs only, when literally you can see the big elephant in the room. The state governors are aware of the big elephant in the room, but they're trying to cushion the impact by, driving social welfare programs. Now, social welfare programs are necessary, but they are not sufficient. All right.
And in 30 seconds, Gospel in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, I'd like you to, highlight what you think is sustainable. What are those things you think, states should put in place to ensure that we don't go back to where we are right now again?
Yes, number one, at a necessary level, they need to scale these welfare programs extensively and ensure that a critical mass benefit from it. But as they do that, they need to lead the strategic structural interventions, fix the structural deficits, all right? Infrastructure, power, access to market, and all of those things that border heavily on food security, fix them. Once you begin to fix them, it becomes easy to move yams from Benue to the tables of households in Lagos. Once that economics is done right, it's easy to scale. You don't need to, do any more significant welfare programs in the future for people to be able to afford bags of yams or bags of rice or 2 bags of yams and all of that. All right, it becomes easy because the nitty-gritty of scaling socioeconomic intervention has been fixed, and that's what we need to do here. All right, anything other than that is short-termist. It's very non-visionary, and it's very limiting socioeconomic wise in terms of empowering a significant block of people towards prosperity. No nation, no continent, no region grows or scales in terms of prosperity on the grounds of a welfareist economy. It's completely impossible.
All right, thank you so much, Gospel Obele, for sharing your thoughts with us on the show today.
Yeah, bye.